Hello, Dr. Carr. It's me, Vanessa Bishop, doing my video on executive coaching today. My experience with executive coaching is basically I didn't have any. I have a great deal of experience with mentoring people, but I never realized what executive coaching really was and what the purpose was or the theories behind it. So I was very excited to start this part of our class and actually learn what it was. I did observe some executive coaching when I was teaching, but after learning what it really is and what the key details are of being a good executive coach, I don't even think that the executive coach was properly trained in my school. I don't think she really understood the concept or the theories behind it, which in turn, the teachers that she was trying to coach did not understand. There was a very superficial training on it, and really it was kind of presented as a mentoring situation. So I was very pleased when I was able to get to know more about executive coaching today, and I totally understand the difference now. So there are 3 of the research articles that we use that I wanted to focus on today. There are my references. And I'm going to start with Mr. Garvey. Robert Garvey did a YouTube video on executive coaching for you. And I always like to listen to him because he's very down to earth, and you can tell that it's very natural for him to talk about these things. So, first he talked about how coaching and mentoring are different, and that's very important to understand. Coaching is more of short-term goals that you're working towards, and mentoring is more of a long term goal of improving your whole concept of your job and your professionalism, and it's almost on a more of an emotional level rather than coaching, which is more of a structured professional level. He suggested that coaching actually is usually about 6 sessions or so. Obviously that depends on the situation and the goals that are decided upon. And he also mentioned quite a few different programs that are used within coaching, and he mentioned the 360-degree feedback, reviews, assessment, and the Myers-Briggs personality assessment, which most of us, I think, have already done that at this point of our education. Okay, so the goal of the coach is to ask questions about what the coachee is saying, not give advice. And that is where I think the breakdown happened in our school. The person that was given the role as a coach did not even want that position. She wanted to be a reading specialist because that's what she had been doing for 20 years, but the principal took it upon himself to give her that role. And again, I don't think she was prepared, and her heart definitely wasn't in it. So the goal is for a coach to ask questions about what the coachee is saying, not giving advice or past experience. And I think teachers, it's very difficult because we want to fix things, we want to help, and we want to use our own experiences to support what we have learned over the years. So we want to help other teachers, and I think with this person not realizing the theories behind what coaching is, I think she was basically trying to be a mentor. He also mentioned that in coaching you take small steps that create a big impact. And again, I think that's where I'm talking about it's a more structured, aligned program rather than mentoring, which can go in any way. It's a solution-focused program. You look at the problem at a very little time, and you want to move quickly through that process so that you can kind of get to some options of solutions and whatnot. Excuse me. The last thing I want to mention about Garvey is that I loved how he gave some examples of how you would use questions to coach. He talked about scaling 1 to 10. On a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel about this problem? Do you feel like this is something that we can work through? These are the kind of questions that are open-ended for that coachee to take with and go. Also saying, supposing, blah, 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 blah. So supposing, and you take yourself and you basically put yourself in that position of, if we did it this way, how do you think that would be? What do you think the outcome would be? And then to make you, a coach is good at helping you to look at yourself, like how did you get yourself in that position? Or why did the problem occur? Is that something that you can, work on yourself to end up solving the problem? And then last, which was my favorite part, was when he talked about the miracle question. And, and they talk about putting yourself into a position. That's where you talk about, imagine that the problem goes away. You wake up tomorrow. How do you feel? Basically, you want to get them to detail how they would feel once this problem is resolved. And it's basically helping them find one thing that they can use to work towards a solution. Okay, and the second research that I read that you had posted was the article in the Journal of Leadership Studies, Volume 5, Number 2. And this was Mary Chandler, Deborah Roebuck, William Swan, and Stephen Brock. They wrote an article that compared education and business using the coaching model, which is exactly what I needed to clarify. It really helped me understand the differences of why in business you hear of all this success with executive coaching. And so I started trying to figure out why is it so different in education. And some of the things that they talked about was that executive coaching right now is rapidly growing, and it's an effective methodology within organizations. And basically, it helps to educate the individuals in the program, and it helps them to develop their professional development. And so, in business, this seems to be a very successful program. In education, again, I saw a failed coaching program, but that doesn't mean that it has to be a failed coaching program. I feel like it was, again, set up incorrectly. People were not knowledgeable about what they were supposed to be doing on either side, the coach or the coachee, and the administrator that implemented it. I don't feel like he really had his brain wrapped around the concept of what coaching was compared to what mentoring was. They mentioned that coaching executives speeds up the learning curve in leadership approaches and fosters a personal development missing in the executive ranks. Basically, also, along with that, the organization needs to realize that they need a change. And in my situation, I don't think those teachers really thought they needed to change. They had decent scores with their kids. They had successful, interactions. The education was obvious. The parents were happy. The school, top notch in Wilmington. So I really feel like if you don't understand there's a problem that needs fixed, you are not going to buy into that program. And, for example, say you're a 5th grade teacher. You've been teaching 17 years, and in comes a reading coach that is her job to tell you to ask you questions. That's what a coach should do. But it didn't happen that way. That person came in giving advice and caused offense. And it was not pretty. I actually sat in a leadership meeting and watched some of the general ed teachers hash it out with the administrator. And there was some personal issues as well as, again, not being properly trained in coaching. And so, along with that, I think they were happy about the successes their kids were having. And so when you're feeling good, and then somebody comes in and starts telling you things that you should be doing to change it, that's kind of a hard pill to swallow when you're a confident teacher of 17 years. So I can relate to both sides, really. Let's see. Okay, so another thing I started wondering was business successful, education not so successful in coaching. Why? And in the reading, in the Journal of Leadership Studies, they mentioned No Child Left Behind, which is a major law that was implemented in 2001. And that basically caused the change in education that everybody was going to be, what's the word? Accountable, basically. Accountable for what growth you're showing, what proficiency you're showing. And I think that a lot of it on top of that is there's a lot of business coming into education at this point. The standardized tests are a very big business that are, there's some major big businesses that are basically, making the curriculum, creating the tests, and grading the tests, all of them in the same business. So obviously that business model started trickling down into the education model. But again, it's not the same situation. There's a lot of outside factors in education that aren't in the business model. For example, students aren't always going to do what you expect them to. And that's the beauty of teaching. It's a learning moment. It's an educational moment. It's a teaching moment. And sometimes what those short-term goals are not going to be appropriate for what's happening in your classroom. On top of it, you have parents that may not be happy with what you think your goals should be. And you come against a brick wall because the parents don't want to support you. In business, I feel like, you're working towards not only, improving yourself, but the productivity and all that stuff. I'm not saying it can't work. I'm saying we may need to look at coaching and education in a little different way than directly the same way as we do business. But overall, I'm not saying it can't work. The last thing I want to mention that they said is that coaches trained to work with educational executives can assist in much needed improvements in the school environment. And again, I'm not saying that can't happen. I'm saying I haven't seen that happen. I think you also need a very strong leader to implement a program like that, and we may not have had that at the time. And last, I want to talk about the YouTube video from IC Agile Solutions IQ. Michael Tardif and Lisa Atkins were in the video. It was called Mentoring versus Coaching, Show Me the Difference. Perfect video to help me understand what the differences were between mentoring and being an executive coach. So basically, reviewing mentoring, we talked a lot about this in the last couple of weeks. Mentors offer their advice, their experiences. Mentors work very hard to lift up the person emotionally, support them deeper than just work skills. So resources, experiences, and basically as a mentor, you give options, you give your ideas, and then the mentor generally chooses from those ideas to implement into their program. And again, a lot of times the mentor should be somebody that's kind of in that same line of education. Again, not so great if the science teacher is trying to mentor a special education teacher. Let's see. With coaching, this is different because this is where I understand now. Coaches don't offer advice. Coaches do not do that. Coaches follow the coachee's agenda, and they ask specific questions to try to get the actual coachee to create their own options that will solve problems.